It was a rainy Thursday night in a quiet little town. The streets were nearly empty, just a few cars rushing past with their headlights cutting through the fog. Inside a small diner on the corner of Main and Fifth, the smell of coffee and fried food filled the air. The place was warm, but the mood was heavy, the kind of night where time felt slow and everything ached just a little more. Emily moved behind the counter, her hair tied back and her apron stained from the long day. She had been on her feet since morning, pulling a double shift to cover another waitress who'd called in sick. Her legs burned, her back hurt, but she kept going. Emily had a son at home, and bills that didn't care how tired she was. She smiled as she refilled an old man's coffee, even though he didn't say thank you. She wiped down tables, picked up crumbs, and kept her voice soft and kind, even when people snapped at her or acted like she wasn't there. That was just part of the job. Emily had learned a long time ago that kindness didn't always come back to you. But she gave it anyway. Not because she had to, but because she believed in being good, even when the world wasn't. The diner was quiet now, just a few customers left. She looked at the clock, hoping the night would end soon, but her hardest moment hadn't even walked in yet. Just as Emily reached for her jacket and started to count down the final minutes of her shift, the bell above the door jingled. A man stepped in, shaking off the rain like he owned the place. He was tall, dressed in a dark, expensive-looking suit. His shoes were shiny, his hair slicked back, and his face held the kind of look that said everyone works for me. We're closing soon, Emily said politely, already knowing this wouldn't matter. I'll be quick, the man said, brushing past her. Table by the window, now. Emily led him to the table without a word. She'd learned that arguing only made things worse. As soon as she handed him a menu, he snapped his fingers at her like she was a dog. Hey girl, he said without even looking up, get me a coffee, black, and hurry. I've had a long day. Emily gave a small nod and walked back to the kitchen, her hands shaking just a little. She wasn't a girl. She was a mother, a hard worker, a woman trying her best. But none of that mattered to people like him. When she brought the coffee, he didn't say thank you. He just stared at the menu and muttered something about the food being cheap diner junk. Then he ordered the most expensive thing they had, the steak dinner. Once it arrived, the complaining started. This steak is dry, these potatoes are cold. Is this what passes for food in this dump? Emily stayed calm, her smile tight and her eyes tired. Each comment felt like a slap. But she didn't let it show. She just kept serving, one plate, one refill, one insult at a time. But something deep inside her was starting to crack. The man finished his meal in silence, pushing the plate away like it had personally offended him. He didn't look up as Emily cleared his table. No thank you, no eye contact, just the sound of a pen scratching across the receipt. He stood up, fixed his suit jacket, and walked out without a word. The bell over the door gave a soft jingle as it closed behind him. Emily walked over to the table and picked up the receipt. At first, she didn't notice anything unusual, just the total and his messy signature, but then she saw the words scribbled underneath. Get a real job. Her stomach sank. She stared at the words, her face blank, her hands frozen in place. There was no tip, not even a single coin. Just that message. A message meant to hurt. And it did. She took a deep breath and swallowed the lump in her throat. Tears threatened to rise, but she pushed them down. There were still a few customers in the diner. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of them. She walked back to the kitchen, clutching the receipt in her hand. Another one stiff you? Her coworker Lisa asked, drying her hands on a towel. Emily didn't say anything, she just handed her the receipt. Lisa read it and shook her head. Jerk. Throw it out. He's not worth your time. But Emily didn't throw it away. Instead, she folded the receipt and slipped it into her apron pocket. She didn't know why, but something told her to keep it. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was pain, or maybe, deep down, she knew this story wasn't over yet. That night, the rain kept tapping on the window, but sleep never came. Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The words on the receipt stuck in her mind. Get a real job. She had heard worse over the years, but this felt different. There was something about that man, his face, his voice, that nagged at her. She'd seen him before, somewhere. She got up quietly, careful not to wake her son sleeping in the next room, and opened her old laptop. It was slow, but it worked. She started searching online, local news articles, business awards, fundraisers, anything that might help her place that face. It took nearly an hour, but finally a photo stopped her cold. There he was, standing behind a podium, shaking hands with a senator, smiling for the cameras. His name was Charles D. Weller, CEO of a major tech company, based just 2 towns over. The headline read, "Weller donates $2 million to Women's Career Initiative." Emily stared at the screen, her heart pounding. There was no mistake, it was him. The same man who had snapped at her, mocked her, and left her that cruel message on a receipt. He was being celebrated for supporting women's futures. The same man who couldn't treat a waitress like a human being. Her hands trembled with quiet rage. This wasn't just rude behavior anymore, it was pure hypocrisy. A lie dressed up in money and fake smiles. All she could think about was how many people had clapped for him, praised him, believed he cared, but Emily had seen the truth. And now, she had the receipt to prove it. The next morning, Emily sat at her kitchen table, with a cup of cold coffee, and the receipt laid out in front of her. The words still stung, "Get a real job." She stared at it for a long time. She wasn't famous. She didn't have thousands of followers, just a small social media page she barely used, but she felt something burning inside her, an ache that wasn't just sadness anymore. It was something stronger, sharper, so she picked up her phone, snapped a photo of the receipt, and opened her social media app. She didn't rant. She didn't name names. She just wrote, "This man told me to get a real job. Here's mine. I served him with respect. He gave me shame." She added the photo, posted it, and closed the app. By the time she got to work that afternoon, her phone was buzzing non-stop. At first, she thought something was wrong, but when she checked, she was stunned. Hundreds of shares, then thousands. People from all over were commenting, servers, teachers, nurses, moms, strangers who had been told the same thing, people who knew what it felt like to be looked down on. And then someone recognized the handwriting. A former employee of Charles D. Weller replied, "I know that handwriting. That's my old boss. Same guy who once told me women aren't built for leadership." That's when everything changed. More comments poured in. Former assistants, interns, event staff, quiet voices who had never felt brave enough to speak, until now. The story got picked up by a local reporter, and then a bigger one. News sites started asking questions. Who was this man who claimed to lift women up, but left waitresses crushed in diners? Emily watched it all unfold with wide eyes and a pounding heart. The receipt that was supposed to shame her, was now being seen by the world, and people weren't laughing at her. They were standing with her. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small, she felt seen. By the end of the week, the story had spread like wildfire. What started as a quiet post from a tired waitress had become national news. Headlines flashed across social media and morning talk shows. CEO accused of workplace hypocrisy. After waitress shares viral receipt, from diner to downfall. The comment that sparked a movement. Outside Charles D. Weller's company headquarters, protesters gathered holding signs that read "Respect all workers" and "Kindness isn't optional." The pressure was building fast. A major sponsor, one of the biggest backers of Weller's women's leadership campaign, announced they were pulling out. In a statement, they said they didn't support leaders who speak about equality, but act with cruelty. Behind closed doors, board members held emergency meetings. Investors were panicking. Shareholders were asking questions. The brand was in trouble, and it all traced back to one man, one dinner, one cruel message on a receipt. Weller tried to fight back. His PR team released a short statement calling the situation a misunderstanding, and claiming the photo was taken out of context. But then a handwriting expert compared the note to his signature on company documents. It was a match. His denial fell apart. Meanwhile, Emily's life had changed overnight. Her inbox was flooded with messages. Some were from journalists asking for interviews. Others were from advocacy groups offering support. A few were just kind people who'd read her story and wanted to say thank you. One message stood out. It was from a nonprofit that helped women who had experienced public shaming or workplace injustice. They called her brave, said her story had helped others find their voice. Emily read the message twice, her hands trembling. She never wanted fame. She didn't post the receipt to ruin someone's life, but she also didn't ask to be insulted for doing her job. Now people were listening. And the man who told her she wasn't enough was finally being held accountable. The balance was shifting, and Emily wasn't just a waitress anymore, she had become a symbol of something bigger. By the end of the second week, the pressure was too much to ignore. The board of directors announced that Charles D. Weller had officially resigned as CEO. The statement was brief and carefully worded, full of corporate phrases like stepping away to focus on personal growth. But everyone knew the truth. He had been pushed out. A few hours later, Weller released a public apology. It was short, cold, forced. He said he was sorry if anyone felt disrespected and claimed he didn't remember the exact encounter. He never said Emily's name, never admitted what he wrote, and no one bought it. The comment sections lit up with disbelief. People called it fake, weak, too little too late. His fall from power was swift and messy, and for many it felt like justice. While he tried to clean up his image, Emily's life took a surprising turn. A well-known women's rights group reached out with an offer that made her eyes fill with tears. They had followed her story. They believed in her courage, and they wanted to offer her something real, a full scholarship to study hospitality management at a respected community college. A chance to grow her career, her way. Emily was speechless. For so long, she'd been told to get a real job. Now someone finally saw the value in the one she already had, and wanted to help her build even more. Back at the diner, the staff surprised her with balloons, cupcakes, and a big homemade card signed by coworkers and regulars. The place that had once been the scene of humiliation now felt like the heart of her victory. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt something she hadn't in years. Hope. Months passed, and the seasons began to change. The leaves turned golden, and the air grew cooler as fall settled in. Life didn't slow down for Emily, it blossomed. She was now a full-time student, studying hospitality management with a focus and fire that surprised even her. Balancing classes, parenting, and a part-time job wasn't easy, but compared to the long nights and rude customers, it felt like a new kind of hard, one filled with purpose. Sometimes, on quiet afternoons, she returned to the diner. Not to work a shift, but just to say hello. She'd bring coffee for her old co-workers, check in on Lisa, and even help out during a rush if they were short-staffed. The place still held memories, some painful, some proud, but it no longer felt like a trap. It felt like the beginning of something better. Back home, on the wall above her small desk, hung the very receipt that once made her feel worthless. Framed, clean and neat beneath the glass. Get a real job, but now those words didn't hurt. They reminded her how far she'd come, and how wrong that man had been. Not just about her, but about the millions of hard-working people who serve, clean, lift, carry and care without ever being seen. Emily smiled whenever she looked at it. Not because of what it said, but because of what it started. Some stories end in silence.